It's Monday, October 27th. I'm Jim Check. With me, Ian Burns. We got a really big show. Carney throws Ford under the bus. It's about time, actually. Carney is growing into the role as Prime Minister. Carney tells provinces to sit down. Eby wants to join Ford in causing job losses. A U.S. administration blames Trudeau-era Liberals. Federal government exposed for more waste. BC Conservatives lead in the polls but want Rustad gone. BC Union settles. And Melei wins big. All that and a lot more on the really big show. So Doug Ford, looking like he's getting some heat, eh? Mark Carney kind of laid it out there in the nicest possible way that we're going to listen to a little bit of clip. This is a bit of a longer clip here, but it's important. And we'll listen to Mark Carney take some questions on why Trump is no longer speaking with him.
Hi, Prime Minister. Murray Brewster with CBC News. President Trump says he's canceled these trade talks because he's upset about the Ontario government ad. We've heard from the Business Council of Canada and even some of President Trump's own advisors who suggest the frustration with Canada runs deeper. So is this about the ads or is this about something else?
Well, look, as I say, and there were a series of very detailed, very specific, very comprehensive discussions, negotiations on the areas I just listed to in response to the previous question, up until the point of those ads running. First point. Second point, I would suggest you take the president at his word for his reason. And that is the reason why, from the perspective of the federal government, which I'm responsible, we stand ready to pick up on those discussions when the United States wishes to pick up on those discussions. So those in the room, those exchanging term sheets, those having the discussions about specific areas where we can make mutual progress to the benefit of workers and businesses and communities in our respective countries had been making progress. Those ads came, the president had the reactions which you have seen, made the decisions that he has made, which, you know, those are his decisions to take, and we're in the situation we're in.
Follow-up? As a follow-up, Prime Minister, given everything that we've seen, do you really think the United States is interested in making a trade deal with Canada?
Look, we are their second largest trading partner. We provide a series of essential goods for their economy. We are one of many providers, but we provide in some areas essential goods for their economy. And we create more room for them to do other things. I'll give you an example. If you look at Canadian exports of aluminum to the United States, and aluminum is bauxite and energy. I mean, there's a little more to it, but you can simplify it to that. The embedded energy in the Canadian aluminum exports, which provides 60% of the aluminum to the U.S. market, is the equivalent of the energy of 10 Hoover dams in the United States. Now, is the best use of that scale of energy, creating that scale of energy to make aluminum in the United States, as opposed to continue to foster and power the AI revolution, which the U.S. is leading, or power homes and others? I mean, these are decisions for the United States to make. Point being, as a supplier to the United States, and I gave aluminum as one, I could give many examples, we are an important supplier in many areas. As well, we are a large customer. You know, for over 30 states, Canada is the largest export customer for those states in the United States. So there is a very strong, deep trading relationship, and there is an alignment of interests in many areas. And that's the reason why we have elements of the arrangements that we have today with a large degree of low tariff trade and the benefits from that. So, you know, we're ready to have those discussions to further improve them, and we'll have them when it's appropriate. But we're not resting because we can build, the return on building at home is far greater than the hit from trade turbulence with the United States. And the opportunities internationally are considerable. And candidly, Canada has not focused on the relationships to the same extent as we should have in any trading environment with the United States, let alone a situation where they're changing their trade policy. And that's what we're doing now.
That's good there. So yeah, there's a couple other clips out there, but Mark Carney, in the nicest possible way, is basically putting Ford under the bus for those ads and saying that that is the reason that there had been considerable progress, and that progress is now stalled. And then also added on, we don't know what that 10% additional tariff means. What is that on? What isn't it on? Are they still following CUSMA? Like, nobody kind of knows what that means right now. But what is clear is that Mark Carney seems to point to Doug Ford for causing this latest stall in trade negotiations.
There's another clip, actually. It was either the same day or the previous day, where he was all over the place. I've never seen him so confused. Maybe he hadn't had lunch or something like that, but he was just absolutely all over the place. He couldn't speak properly. And during that one, which was kind of like it's like opening remarks at some sort of dinner by the looks of things. And that one, he really went for Doug Ford, and he called him like President Ford, and then he was like, "Oh, I don't know why I confused those two people together. Like, why would I do that?" Implying, in other words, that Doug Ford is like Donald Trump. And then he also said that he's unpredictable. And he was acting like somebody who's really angry with someone, but trying not to show it, trying to put a sort of funny face on it.
Be very polite about it. And we've said that in the past here on the show, that Doug Ford is kind of like the rabid dog that, sometimes you thought that Carney kind of let him loose just to kind of, let the pit bull out and then, kind of rein him back in. But I think this time Doug Ford went too far, and is likely going to cause some Canadians some job losses. And, pouring that Crown Royal on the ground, all those other, just those silly moments when Crown Royal still manufactures whiskey in Canada. We have to learn how to compete and stop thinking we're entitled to things. That's the biggest thing. We have to compete. We're not entitled to these American companies. We have to compete. Why did they come here in the first place? I talk about the auto sector. I put a really good LinkedIn post out there and talking about the gutting of Detroit back in the 80s, when all of the automakers left Detroit and they went to Mexico and Canada for incentives, better deals, cheaper labor. And Detroit went from 1.8 million to 700,000. I mean, Detroit was gutted. I'm sure these people in Detroit weren't screaming how they're entitled, or maybe they were. But
they were.
you have to compete, just like Detroit has to compete. We have to compete. And I said, Melanie Jolie has the answer sitting right next to her. She can just tap Mark Carney on the shoulder and say, "Why did you leave? Why did Brookfield leave? And why are all your investments in the United States?" That's the answer. Canada needs to compete on the world stage. And this is the first time I've heard Mark Carney, kudos to him, sounding like a prime minister and sounding more even-keeled and sounding more like somebody that could lead Canada into a better place. Like, he resisted just throwing Doug Ford under the bus, like a really nastily, but he also made the point fairly clear that we need all these trade deals. But
I would say, I mean, at least Doug Ford is honest. And he's, well, I mean, I say he's honest. Is he honest? At least he's consistent. Let's put it that way. He's consistent. And he's been, for several months now, consistently hostile to Donald Trump, always willing to say that.
Wow.
Mark Carney, on the other hand, for my money, has been a lot more offensive and insulting towards Donald Trump than Doug Ford has. Doug Ford is like he's like a late night show comedian or something. What was that fella called? Farley. He's like that Farley fella who died quite young. He's like him. He's just like a clown. I mean, you sort of take him for what he is. Mark Carney, on the other hand, can barely speak English because he's always trying to say the perfect thing, to absolutely perfect his sentences so that he doesn't actually reveal any information. But for all that, Mark Carney still, just a couple of weeks ago, implied that Donald Trump doesn't know even the most basic things about economics. Like absolute sort of 101 stuff. I mean, how is that not a more serious insult than Doug Ford being a clown and doing an ad that just features Ronald Reagan talking about what his opinion was of free trade? I mean, Carney has insulted Trump considerably more. And he did it even that, like I was telling you, where he referred to, where he said, "Oh, I don't know why I thought of those two people together, Ford and Trump." That's another insult. I think during the same one or another one, he said he was talking about how Canada has the best mining expertise. I think that's what it was anyway, about mining. And he just said, and he mocked Trump. He said it's gigantic. He like actually did a sort of mini Trump impression. Carney repeatedly insults Donald Trump. So he's not in a position to say and be prime ministerial and say, "Oh, look at this idiot." That's not good enough. And I would also say, just to state the absolute obvious, I don't think this has anything to do with that anyway. Because if Trump really was so fragile, he would have been upset about many other things that Carney has said, that Jolie has said, people like that. Champagne said something quite extraordinary not so long ago, a few weeks ago. It's got nothing to do with that. And the CBC, in all its genius, has got some sources that have told they've told CBC that Ford has been annoying Trump, and that the alcohol that you mentioned, the LCBO, which is like the the liquor store, how they've taken American alcohol off the shelves, and just some other things that because Ford goes on like Fox News and stuff quite often, doesn't he? And he's been saying very bad things about Donald Trump, and they're implying that that's what it's about. I just don't believe that. I don't believe that either. I'm sorry. I just refuse to believe that anybody is that fragile and stupid. I do not think Donald Trump is anywhere near that stupid. He's not. He's obviously not a stupid person at all. This is tactical. This is clearly tactical. And
Whoa.
I think also in response to that, I think Carney is also being tactical. And if he is giving the impression that he's thrown Ford under the bus, that's also tactical. He's not really doing it though.
What it really does highlight is Team Canada, and it is not Team Canada right now, and that's what he did caution the premiers, and he said, like, this is the federal government's area, and stay out of it. But here's David Eby now says that he's going to launch anti-tariff ads as Ontario pauses their campaign. Like again, is Eby going to go through with this or not?
But again, look, this just exposes it all the more for my money, that this has got nothing to do with this kind of thing, because the BC government has been playing ads in the US trying to poach their health workers and bragging about how successful they've been, even though it's not much success to speak of. But they have been doing that. From Donald Trump's perspective, if he is as fragile as he wants us to believe he is, don't you think that would have really infuriated him, that the Canadians are trying to come and steal nurses and doctors from American hospitals and things like that? Obviously it would. But he hasn't said a word about that because he's not bothered about that. Just like he didn't say a word about anything that the people in Germany and France and England, he's constantly talking about how much he loves England and gave them the sort of first deal. We called it a really good deal. In England, or Britain, I should say, the kind of sub-prime ministerial, like from the regions, like the cities, places like Scotland and Wales, they've all been hostile to Donald Trump, exceedingly hostile to Donald Trump. He didn't care. He didn't bring that up in the trade negotiations. It's got nothing to do with that.
One of the wins.
And I think you said Carney was prime ministerial. It is prime ministerial if he continues to behave as he is and realizing that this is just a bluff. And I think he does know that.
One of the wins out of this, for sure, is it looks like he's getting a lot more support, and he's trying to get this budget passed, which they thought was going to cause an election. So maybe that's part of it, too, because there's a lot of people rallying around the flag again, so he likely will get his budget passed with more ease than if this wasn't going on right now. Here's Trump, though, speaking on Air Force One about Canada.
Of Canada itself, they all knew exactly what the ad was. The Prime Minister knew, everybody knew. The Prime Minister knew what the ad was before it went on.
Will you see him in APEC? Do you want to meet with him?
don't want to meet with them. No, I'm not going to be meeting with them for a while. No, I'm very happy with the deal we have right now with Canada. We're going to let it ride.
That is Trump speaking to reporters on air.
No. I mean, I can't see.
Absolute bollocks.
I can't believe that Carney didn't know that he was going to run the ads either. He was just at his house there recently, so I'm sure he would have told him I was going to run those ads.
But I'm also sure that Mark Carney assumes what we all assume, which is that Donald Trump's a big enough boy not to weep manly tears at a commercial featuring Ronald Reagan. Totally harmless. Well, I mean, totally harmless, innocuous little advert.
When he first saw
nothing about it is in it. It's not insulting. It's not saying Donald Trump's a big fat stinky bomb or anything. It's just Ronald Reagan
when he
talking
first
about
saw
tariffs. It's got nothing to do with this. I just think it's an insult to us all that he continues with this farce.
When he first saw it, he actually liked it. He said, "I would run that ad myself," and it was just only a couple days.
Absolutely,
changed his
he
tune.
reveals his own. You know, maybe he's getting on a bit, and he's not as good at with the art of the deal anymore. But obviously, this is the art of the deal, TM, isn't it? This is him trying to get a deal. And look, the thing is, a lot of people, the usual suspects on Twitter and all the rest of it, are like complaining about what an idiot Carney is, what an idiot Ford is. You can't make that assessment based on what we know, on the knowledge that we actually have. However, if we could be granted access to the discussions, we might well come to that conclusion that Mark Carney is a fool, because it might be something to do with, for example, supply management or something like that, which is extraordinarily foolish on his part, because that's just to appease Quebec, to benefit the Liberal Party. If that was true, if it was just some little adjustments to supply management that were desired from the United States, and Carney had said no because he wanted to protect the Liberal Party and his strength in elections, then we could rightly get angry with him and call him a fool. But as it is, the only person that looks like a fool is Donald Trump.
Well, one thing for sure, the Liberal Party has got religion on LNG. So Carney's out there in Asia there, and he's talking to Petronas, and a leading investor in LNG Canada, a project creating tens of thousands of jobs. And he's been talking about LNG like it was the second coming. All of a sudden, they realize that LNG is a real deal. I don't know where they were for the past 10 years. They were begging for LNG. The Japanese were begging for LNG. The Europeans begging for LNG. The South Koreans begging for LNG. The Germans begging for it. Everybody begging for it. And Trudeau said there was no business case for it. All of a sudden, they seem to have found their way and realized that LNG. How long will it take them to realize that oil is something that needs also to be sold to the world?
To my knowledge, though, Mark Carney has not yet been asked what advice he gave Justin Trudeau when he was an advisor to the Liberal Party, an advisor to Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister, when all this was kicking off, when the Greeks, Germans, Japanese, South Koreans, all the rest of them came and got on their knees and begged Justin Trudeau, please, God help us, we need your energy. And Trudeau said, no, bugger off. What did Mark Carney tell Justin Trudeau then? What was his advice?
We do know what he said on the Northern Gateway Pipeline, because he came out in committee and advised against it. So that part is a matter of record.
And then, there was, I was watching an interview, I think it was CBC. Anyway, what's the difference? It was one of the main sort of broadcast outlets. And they were talking to Alberta LNG or whatever, the lobby in Alberta talking about LNG. And the question was about BC suddenly being hot now for LNG. And the answer from this, whoever it was, this expert, this lobbyist was, they've realized now that they need the money. They're in a terrible fiscal situation and they need the royalties. They need the money. They need the taxes. And I mean, the cynic in me is sort of satisfied with that answer. That's why Mark Carney now seems to have changed his mind, because Canada needs the money. The fiscal position of this country is a nightmare, an unfolding and worsening nightmare. And one of the only ways that this country can actually make money of any kind is by selling oil and gas. So therefore, Mark Carney's thought, all right then.
Energy is our strength. We've been saying this on the show forever. Just think the position we'd be in right now if we would have sold the LNG to those that came begging for it and also did the Northern Gateway Pipeline. Where would we be? Definitely not at the mercy of the Americans right now. But that's where we find ourselves with 10 years of bad policy. But Mark Carney here talking in Malaysia there. Let's listen in here.
We are going to double our non-U.S. exports over the course of the next 10 years. We think we can do it in a much shorter period of time. That's $300 billion of additional exports. Most of that is going to come from Asia, in our view, and I'll justify that in a second. But on top of this, and I just underscore this because this is a two-way relationship, our expectation coming out of the budget is that we're laying out a path for at least $500 billion of additional investment in Canada in the next 5 years. Additional, not total, additional. And that's U.S. So these are orders of magnitude that start to be relevant. Areas, both in terms of the two-way trade and the domestic investment, we're basically going to build out the infrastructure to help drive energy corridors, both clean and conventional, trade corridors, new port infrastructure, and others. But from LNG, where we're putting ourselves on a path to at least 50 million tons by the end of this decade, but double that by 2040, potentially more. It's easily done when you have the fourth largest reserves of LNG in the world, and you have demand here for the energy transition. Indonesia free trade agreement was done quite quickly. We pushed it over when we came into government. We've just announced that intention to finish the ASEAN free trade agreement, which has been carefully negotiated for 4 years, which is going to be completed next year, but a similar timeline.
And this is the problem. Deals aren't getting done. 4 years to get a deal done. 4 years. Like Trump was there in that same area. He signed a bunch of deals, including he got nominated again for another Nobel Prize when he signed the peace deal there between Cambodia and Thailand. They formalized that ceasefire into a peace deal, and he signed a bunch of trade deals. We're talking about 7 months in. We're talking about finishing a trade deal that's 4 years old that they've been 7 months in, we haven't even said, will we build an oil pipeline or not? Yes or no? It's a simple question. 7 months in, just answer the question. Will we build a pipeline so that Alberta can get its product to market?
But I mean, he's talking about trade deals with Indonesia and things like that. He was also bragging about Canada's, membership in other trade deals. He was talking about the European Union. And how Canada can, he's talking about this rules-based order, which no longer exists other than in the minds of people like Mark Carney. But he's talking about the European Union, and I was like scratching my head. And I was thinking, like, what trade deal? There was a trade deal negotiated, but it isn't in effect. It's not in. It's got some kind of temporary. There's a weird kind of temporary action going on with that, where it kind of is in place, but it's not formally in place. Why is that? Supply management. Similar situation with the British. I mean, he is absolutely enamored of the British, isn't he? He might as well be British. Well, he was British. He had the passport. I don't know if he still has it. Goes on and on and on about Britain, constantly in London. What's going on with that trade deal? Oh, yeah, supply management, again, is the obstacle. And it infuriates even the people that Carney thinks like are in the bag. They're already our friends. Are they though? They're not happy about supply management, but that will never be sacrificed because Quebec is too powerful and too important and it's crucial to the Liberal Party's hopes of being in power. No, who's talking about this as well? I mean, this is just not a conversation that anybody's having, but supply management has just such an enormous effect on Canada's domestic and international politics. And it's so rarely discussed. And even Carney apparently isn't aware of it, or more likely doesn't want to talk about it. But I also found when he was talking about Asia, there's a lot of discussion about Asia going on. And he's saying, we want to double our exports and we expect Asia to account for sort of most of that. And when he says Asia, he's not really talking about Kazakhstan. He's talking about Japan, China, South Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, all the rest of it, like the Southeast Asia and East Asia, basically. That's what he's talking about. So in other words, the Pacific Ocean. How do you get things? Well, let's ask the first question. How do you get things from Canada to East Asia? You have to go to Vancouver, basically. Very, very difficult, as we know, to get anything done there, to get anything built. Obviously, Vancouver is our biggest port, but there's going to need to be a lot of work there, and that will be very complicated. But then the other question is, what happens then? So you leave Vancouver, consult your map. You leave Vancouver, and then you've got to cross the Pacific Ocean, the world's largest ocean. Who who is it that makes sure that or what entity is it that guarantees that those ships aren't just robbed or sunk? The United States Navy. The United States Navy is what guarantees freedom of navigation on the planet. Mark Carney's told us that it's not a transition, it's a rupture. The Americans are looking into themselves. They're no longer interested in the world. What if the Americans withdraw that guarantee of freedom of navigation? And all of a sudden, it's no longer the US Navy will turn up and blow you up if you try and sink a ship or something like that, or you try and charge a toll for going through the East China Sea, for example. The Chinese come up and say, okay, Canada, this convoy from Canada, we're going to charge you 20% of the value of this of these ships, of the contents of these ships. It's the Americans that make sure that that doesn't happen. What is going to happen if we go all in on the Pacific Ocean, all in on East Asia, and all of a sudden there's no longer freedom of navigation? Are we going to send our lifeboats? Are we going to send the Coast Guard to protect our convoys with all of our oil and gas? But again, not even mentioned. This doesn't even enter the minds, it seems to me, of these people. And I find that worrying almost more than anything.
We got our old friend Peter MacKay speaking to CTV. You're talking about the trade deals that Stephen Harper signed. I think it was close to 40 he got signed. And here we are, again, 7 months in. And we're yet to say the word oil. And we're yet to sign a deal. Let's listen into what Peter MacKay has to say.
Ending today at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Malaysia, looking to drum up investment into Canada. Earlier this week, Carney said Ottawa has a goal of doubling exports to markets outside the U.S. in the next decade as Canada looks to diversify its markets. U.S. President Donald Trump is also set to attend the summit. The Prime Minister's office has said there is no meeting set between Trump and Carney. With me now is Peter MacKay, former Foreign Affairs Minister. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Now, we do know Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister was in Asia trying to lay the groundwork for a meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Mark Carney. How significant could a meeting between these two leaders be?
Well, I think it would be significant, Renee, and I think that both the work of the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Prime Minister is very much in keeping with this plan to diversify trade and to move away from an over-reliance on the American market. But that is going to take time. And let's be clear, we are never going to completely decouple or, in fact, at any time in the near future, replace the amount of trade that we do with the United States of America. So I think we need to take a little bit of an appetizer suppressant or sort of level out the expectation that we're going to somehow completely break away from the Americans and replace that with other marketplace.
What can realistically be accomplished at these summits?
Well, personal relationships matter. And I think what we have seen is a complacency. We, Canada, have already signed free trade agreements with over 40 countries. In fact, the Harper government set a record pace for signing new agreements with the European Union, with the Asia Pacific. There are other markets that we should be aggressively pursuing. The United Kingdom comes to mind. And so the expectation is do both. Do the work to get new market share, but also, of course, shore things up on the home front. And I think that's where this balance may be a little bit out of whack right now, where Prime Minister Carney is overseas, but there's a bit of a turmoil and an emergency here at home, including what premiers are doing, going wildly off in all directions and provoking the type of very catastrophic reaction we saw from President Trump this week.
Yes, that is certainly very true.
Yeah, it's you know, like all the love Mark Carney seems to have for Keir Starmer and both ways. Why don't we have a trade deal with the UK yet?
Well, it's kind of like a preliminary one there, but it's not formalized, and the British are constantly furious about it. It could sort of theoretically just collapse in any second because of supply management. Yeah.
Mark Carney says he's going to meet. He plans to meet. It's not for sure on there yet. Plans to meet with the president, Xi Jinping, in China. I mean, there is a bunch of trade disputes as well with China, including canola, pork, EVs on both sides, and there's definitely causing a lot of grief to our agriculture here in Canada, and that one hasn't really been talked about a lot. It's always the U.S. one that's talked about.
Yeah, and he's stuck the knife into Justin Trudeau, which I thought was interesting, saying, it was quite an amusing one. He keeps on having a dig at Justin Trudeau in his own little sort of oblique fashion. But he said, yeah, China's the second largest economy in the world, our second largest trade partner, blah, 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 all these things about China. And then he said, and yet for the last 7 years, we've barely been speaking to them. It's like, oh yeah, last 7 years, while Justin Trudeau was Prince of the Universe.
We're going to talk about Justin later, so stick around for that. He's back in the limelight, loving life large. But I will pass on this story because we already kind of did that one. But here's Scott Bessett there had something to say about the ad there. He had a different take on the ad than some of the stuff we've been talking about.
Major trade issue, which is Canada, of course. This week, President Trump abruptly broke off trade talks with Canada and put another 10% tariff on Canada in response to an ad that the government of Ontario ran. It features former President Ronald Reagan. Why is the president setting trade policy based on a television ad he doesn't like?
Well, Kristen, let's think about this. This is a kind of propaganda against U.S. citizens. It's psyops. Why would the government of Ontario? I'm told that they have spent or were planning to spend up to $75 million on these ads to come across the U.S. border. So what was the purpose of that other than to sway public opinion? And it's some kind of propaganda that the premier of Ontario unilaterally launched.
Will the 10% tariffs apply to all Canadian goods, Mr. Secretary?
Kristen, I've been traveling since this unfortunate event happened. I know that the ad's been taken down. So, we'll have to see. But I just think it was terrible, terrible judgment by this premier, who has a bit of a reputation for being a hothead.
Does the president know?
So there you go. There's a Treasury Secretary who doesn't even know what that 10% means. So probably only Trump knows what that means right now. So,
but he also apparently has no principles whatsoever, and he's willing to just tell the stupidest lies imaginable because he thinks his boss is watching him on TV and he doesn't want to upset his boss. How stupid is this guy willing to make himself seem? Is my question. He's talking about, he's trying to sway public opinion. It's interference. And there's a few people in the comments on YouTube saying that, it was interference, political interference. Why is Mark Carney the Prime Minister? Answer, because of Donald Trump. That's why. You want to talk about political interference? We have a government now that's in place because of a foreign country and a leader of a foreign country that intervened and did exactly the right thing, perfectly manipulated the Canadian people to get what he wanted, which is, for some mysterious reason, another Liberal government. I mean, enough. Shut up. Are you taking yourself seriously? Never mind this situation, would be my question to Scott Bessent. It's just, there comes a time, I think, where you just have to tell people to shut up, because it's gone beyond politeness. It's no longer reasonable.
Well, here's another take, though. Here's another take, and this is Kevin Hassett and why they called off the talks, and he's blaming Trudeau a little bit here. Let's hear him.
Can you start with the Canadian trade negotiations, where things stand?
Yeah, obviously the President Truth, something that reveals his frustration with the actions and postures of the Canadians through months of negotiations, and we'll see how it goes.
Mr. Hassett, on Canada, you said the president was frustrated, but is this just a knee-jerk reaction?
I think the frustration has built up over time. I've been involved in some of these negotiations, and the Canadians have been very difficult to negotiate with. And you look at all the countries around the world that we've made deals with, and the fact that we're now negotiating with Mexico, separately reveals that it's not just about one ad, that there's frustration that's built up.
And is he planning to speak with the Prime Minister?
He's got a bit more self-respect, hasn't he, that chap? That was a lot closer to the truth, I think.
I think that is a lot more closer. And I think the thing with all the virtue signaling going on in Canada, even with the media and all that, about how, this ad was okay and all this stuff. I mean, you can be right about that. It doesn't matter. We need the Americans more than they need us. That's the thing. Like, we're looking at job losses, and we're going to look at this. Look at this. The CTV is starting to prep Canadians. Layoffs, what you need to know and how to prepare. These are not good ads. These are not good stories. And here's another one. While annual inflation accelerated 2.4 last month, food inflation outpaced it at 4%, and then record food bank usage. This is what's going on in Canada. Like, our economy needs Doug Ford and David Eby and them to sit down and it's just swallow their because their pride or whatever it is they have, their virtue signaling will not fill bowls for the families in Canada. Do you know what I mean? We can't eat virtue signaling. We need an economy that's vibrant. We need to sell our energy. We need to learn to compete again. Trudeau got rid of competition. We can't compete.
I would say it's even beyond that, sell our energy. It's almost like we need to go. I tell you what would be a good idea. We should go to places like India and China take a working group led by Melanie Jolie. Go to those countries and figure out how to lead a country and try and figure out what it is that the leaders of those countries prioritize. And ask yourself, would the Chinese ever turn away from selling something that the world wants for vague moral reasons, and in exchange have a part of their population being hungry? Would the Chinese do that? The answer is obviously no. And the reason is because the Chinese will do anything. They'll do anything that they need to do to make sure that their people can live as well as possible. But that, for some reason, is not the case in this country. If people it's not just sell energy and then we'll be richer. It's kind of, if there are people in this country who are going hungry, sell anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Just drop the morals. You can no longer be a sanctimonious, holier than thou kind of country if you can't even feed your own people. That then goes out the window because now you need to survive.
This should make many Canadians, I think, even cry. It's just absolutely disheartening to see that a country as rich as Canada, well, what's beneath our feet? And then this is it. Canada's hunger crisis worsens, food banks becoming necessary for survival. And we have a federal government that talks about how we need to keep, these food programs in school because kids don't have enough food to eat. This is all liberal policies for the last 10 years. This is it. And this continues. And we have virtue signaling. Like I said, you can't eat a bowl of virtue signaling. Doug Ford, Eby, Justin Trudeau, all of them. Like, say the words oil, build the pipeline, build the pipeline. 20 years ago, I was in the mining industry. I was a controller. 20 years to build a mine site. 20 years. 20 years. How are we supposed to compete? I interviewed Brenda Bailey recently, the finance minister, and gave her the example of what they're doing for a Canadian company in Alaska, what the Trump administration is doing for them. They're building a road, a 200-mile road to get to that mine site. I said, will you do the same in BC? She said, absolutely. Show us then. Show us that you're good. I have a friend in the mining industry. It takes a year to get a permit just to drill a hole. Just to drill a hole. A year. People can't eat virtue signaling.
But yeah, in a nutshell. And it's like, also, if you're exceedingly impoverished as an individual and you can't even afford food, you're struggling to get enough calories in to stay alive, are you then going to lean on your principles and say, oh no, I'm not going to do this thing that I can do. I'm really good at it and it'll make me loads of money and I'll have as much food as I want. I'm not going to do that because it's bad for the environment or whatever. Obviously you're not. But for some reason, the countries like Canada don't act like that. They don't operate like that. Meanwhile, in China, 60% of their energy mix is coal. India, I think it's even higher. These countries aren't listening. They don't care. They want their citizens to prosper.
Well,
but for some reason, in Canada, it's a questions about global concern. It's like, well, what is this going to mean for the people of Palau or something? What is it going to mean for the Polynesian? It's like, dear God, you try and lead a country like that, you're going to crash and burn at some point.
President Xi said it. He said, "I will not impoverish our nation in the hunt for climate goals." And
or anything.
Yeah. And then the grift that's coming is carbon capture. You're going to hear that more and more and more, and you can say you heard it here first. Carbon capture is going to be, when they start talking about removing that emissions cap, they're going to replace it with carbon capture, which is just the ability for private corporations to tax our energy. Absolutely.
Yeah, he mentioned that when he was talking about all of Canada's strengths. He actually said, like, we've got one of the something like one of the highest capacities or potential capacities for carbon capture. It's like, oh God. But I'm sorry, I just have to respond to somebody who called me an idiot earlier. I'm just going to find the...
You were going to find that. I was hoping that you would go right by it, but hey.
No, because this is an important point, actually. Obviously, quite the contrary. It seems that this person is an idiot. But he's talking about international copyright laws were infringed upon. I assume you're talking about the ad there. I mean, I haven't got time to explain it to you. Go on ChatGPT or something like that and ask those questions, and you'll learn why what you said is very stupid.
We got lots to get through, though. Food Professor put this on, and this is Carney's I can deal with Trump, vote for me. Last election, and then if this budget doesn't go through, nobody can deal with Trump, vote for me. So the decision comes in a couple days here, though. Bank of Canada and the Fed are meeting here right away. We do expect a cut in rates. So the Bank of Canada expected to cut rates. Again, the economy in Canada, I'd say prepare for an economic winter. We had a guy on talking about an economic winter. Some people choosing to go to southern climates for an economic winter. Some people choosing to buy a jacket. Somebody in our comments also put out that Canada is the only G7 nation. We've said this a million times as well. Canada, the only G7 nation that has zero gold reserves. Zero. Absolutely zero. And we sold the last of it, I think, in 2015, 2016, and said that it was an antiquated asset. Turns out it isn't. But Canada cut. If they do a 0.25 cut, that'll bring it down to about 2.25, and they do expect a cut in the U.S. as well, which gives room for Canada to cut. But the real estate, where most of Canadian wealth is in real estate, that's suffering as well, and they need that cut in the worst way.
And when investment is down, and we desperately need to increase productivity through investment, it would help in that regard as well.
We're going to highlight some of the waste and abuse that goes on here in Canada. Meanwhile, Canadians have record food bank usage. Not so much for the government, though. They just continue to tap the taxpayer. The National Research Council tried to conceal the six-figure cost of Brazilian walnut lounge furniture in its financial accounts after an executive complained she did not like picnic tables in the workplace patio. And that's from Access to Information. This is from Holly Dolan Blacklocks. The building originally budgeted at close to $60 million was completed at $77 million. The rooftop lounge is huge. Rope management has capacity for 274 people and will be a complete missed opportunity and not fit out the space with nice furniture over spring when staff come to use it for social. They don't even go to work, for social and work gatherings. They don't even go to work. We're going to talk about that later. Records show the Research Council solicited a $300,000 estimate from one supplier for Brazilian walnut lounge furniture with trellises, flower boxes, concrete splash pad, and umbrellas. Wow.
Is that an actual photograph of what we're talking about here? Because that is just tasteless trash. It's such garbage to think that that's what they've spent this money on. And when they say Brazilian walnut, do they mean they got walnut trees or they got walnut lumber from Brazil? In a country like this, where you can't walk around without tripping over a tree.
One lab manager urged staff to hurry up and purchase to use the unspent funds before March 31st expiry of the budget. We need to get the job done for the fiscal year, and I used to be an auditor as well, and you saw so much of that in the hospital budgets where they would spend money just to get rid of it so they could have that budget the following year. And again, Canadians, record food bank usage, and the government continues to just waste taxpayer money. And It's disheartening, and we're going to miss the.
If it looked nice, we might at least be able to comment on that, and that would be like a kind of consolation. But if it looks like this sort of like AstroTurf,
no,
it looks like a kind of IKEA kids play zone or something, like a postmodernist kids play center with AstroTurf. Absolutely hideous.
We're going to skip this next story and we're going to go to the other one. Federal managers billed more than $7 million in pay with overtime to develop pandemic app few Canadians ever used. Again, who cares, right? It's just money. Of the 20 million spent, 7.5 million was the total was for public service salary and employee benefits. Said the memo. Additional millions were contracted with sole source suppliers. This is one of the things the Auditor General pointed out many times. Like they didn't follow contract rules, just sole source supplied contracts. And records show 33 million mobile devices used in Canada, only 29%, about 6.9 downloaded the app, and usage remained limited. This was that app that was just absolutely atrocious. I think it was, what, $65 million, right? Or, you know, $60 to $65 million for this ArriveCam program. And the government is going to try and get some of that money back. They're suing for $194,000. Wow. It's almost like you know, like, here's $194,000. Stop going after the money. Why not go after the $60 million plus dollars?
Overtime as well. I just have to kind of chuckle a little bit at that.
Then,
like in the private sector, people do overtime all the time. It's just like they don't file expense forms to get $7 million in back pay. It's like just another amusing aspect of this story where the public sector is just a breeze compared to real life.
Meanwhile, if you live outside of the, you know, government worker or elitists or politicians, almost a third of Canadians, 31%, are carrying credit card balances, typically charged at 19% or more. This is really bad. I had the insolvency trustee on here from MNP Canada. I think it was, I can't remember the number off the top of my head now, 67% of Canadians are $200 away from meeting their monthly obligations. And once you start racking up credit card debt, that gets bad really fast. Like 19%. I mean, a majority of Canadians, 60%, report having trouble keeping up or sometimes struggling with bills. And that's from the Canadian Financial Capability Survey. Meanwhile, the Canadian government continues to waste Canadian taxpayer dollars. About one-third, 34%, report their monthly household spending is more than their income, 34%. Almost half Canadians, 47%, think they have too much debt. About 49% have to use credit cards, overdraft, or borrow from savings and daily expenses. Findings were drawn from questionnaires. It's bad. It's absolutely bad. There's an economic winter in Canada. Stop with the virtue signaling. Stop Doug Ford. Stop David Eby. We need jobs in Canada. We need the ferry thing. Like, why did we send those BC ferries to China? And yet that question hasn't been answered by Mark Carney yet either. Maybe he can
I think it's less likely to ask it now that he's trying to chum up and get friendly with China. Wouldn't want to rescind a $1 billion contract when you're trying to make friends.
And then job losses are mounting, and then here Doug Ford is likely going to cost more job losses, another 10% tariff. Tariffs are having a profound effect on several sectors, including auto, steel, and aluminum. And we're seeing quite a bit of job losses in those sectors. Forestry, all those things. And forestry was gutted long before Trump showed up. This is bad policy by the BC NDP. Bad policy. Go back and read all the stories we did on forestry over the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, it's Quebec is the other big forestry province, isn't it? And they're not doing that well either. It's kind of
and look at this juxtaposition. Here we have Canadians, record debt, using credit cards to buy groceries, record food bank usage, and here we have the federal employees now. They're upset that they're being asked to go back to work. An order limiting federal employees' work from home feels uncaring, says the Department of Foreign Affairs. You need more than just words. They're talking about how they need all this, you know, like this holistic turnover renovations, return to office mandates have caused stress and confusion, as well as the feeling for ground is always shifting beneath you. What do you think it feels like for the average Canadian that can't pay their bills every month? What do you think it feels like when they have to use a credit card that they know is 19% interest on it? What do you think they feel like?
And when they look at their pay slip and they look at the bit that says tax and they see all the money that they're not going to get on with the money that they've earned because it's gone to things like the federal government. I mean, that's the dimension that is so often not discussed. It's that the two sectors, private and public, one of them pays for the other one. So there's a certain sense of grievance there that you really can't ignore. It's very important.
The Department of Foreign Affairs has 13,235 employees and an annual budget of $8.4 billion. Wow. And they want workplace respect and fairness. I think Canadians want to be able to buy groceries for their children, put gas in the car without the next climate grift coming along, the what you call carbon capture. Canadians would like jobs to build ferries.
I'd just say as well, back on that debt thing, you hear the federal government often talk about, or even Mark Carney personally, often talking about Canada's good debt situation. Like, got a lot of room to expand, or the IMF is another one. I mean, Canada's actually has a disastrous relationship with debt. It's just that we're slightly better than some clown countries, like in Europe and places like that. So that's ridiculous on the face of it anyway. But I would also say that when it comes to personal debt, Canada is, I can't remember if it's the worst or like second or third or something like that. It's one of the worst on the planet, of just every single country, when it comes to how indebted the average person is. Obviously, that is a gigantic tragedy, and that has enormous consequences for the health of your economy. That's quite as important as government debt, or at least deserves to be discussed at the same time.
We are doing a series on the economic winter, what to do, how to get ready for an economic winter, and also in one of the comments here, some people leaving to go south to southern climates to escape the winter that's coming. Yeah, that's all true. And the ferry comment there is, how do we compete with China when they can have human rights violations, use inferior steel, and have no industrial carbon tax? And then David Eby says the reason that they went there is, for one of those reasons, is cost. How do we compete? So Canadians, I guess, there is no opportunity for jobs, no opportunity. And then we can't build subs. We can't build ferries. What is it that we can do? We can't sell oil.
It might look on the face of it that it's cheaper to do it in China, but in the long run, as has been explained by many other people, you would probably benefit by paying for it yourself, because then there'd be so many knock-on effects, and it would all that commerce that would generate. But somebody here, well, I say somebody, we know who it is. It's our dear friend Lightning Rod. He says the USA owns however many $1 trillion. Why exclude the USA? Because we're talking about debt. Why exclude the USA? I would say just go on, like Mark Carney. Mark Carney was having a laugh about Donald Trump's inability or apparent ignorance of the reserve currency, the world's reserve currency, and what that means. I would just advise you, just Google reserve currency.
I think I can take this one.
You might learn a few things about why it doesn't really matter quite as much that the Americans have huge debt.
I can take this one. The Americans have the reserve currency of the world, so they can export inflation. Canada does not. Like, take a look around and look at the reserve banks and see how many of them are holding Canadian dollars. You know what Canadian bank holds? No gold and U.S. treasuries. So we do it to ourselves. Like, the American dollar is completely different than the Canadian dollar. You cannot compare them. They are not the same thing. It's absolutely a ridiculous and ludicrous thing to say you're comparing those currencies and the debt of the two nations. Absolutely crazy. Majority of Canadians would pay more for groceries from Canada, even if the U.S. product costs less. No, they won't. If you're at the point where 50% of you can't make you think that's what they're doing? If you can't put groceries on the table, you think you're looking at it and saying, I'm going to pay more. Is it family
Sometimes
first?
there's a massive gap as well. Sometimes they're side by side, I find, in the store. There's a big pile of American, like, blueberries or something, and then there's, like, whatever. They might not even be Canadian, but, like, from another country. And it's like, all right, the difference is, like, $3 or $4. It's like, okay, well, God bless the USA, I suppose.
We have a little bit, we got some BC news here for you.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
So the latest Angus Reid poll shows that the BC Conservatives are ahead in the poll, but they want Rustad to resign. I didn't think he'd last the week. He's still here. He's definitely adamant that he's sticking around. So will he last this week?
I don't know, but I mean, this in a funny way, you'd think this would benefit Rustad, but I think this might actually be a negative thing for Rustad, because this shows, just like the rest of this report from Angus Reid, just shows how like exceedingly unpopular the NDP actually are. Like, people are really sick of that party. So if the BC Conservatives had their house in order, instead of being a 1-point lead, it could be like 15 or something like that. You know, it's like, that's what I think people will take from this, or some of the members will take from this.
Sorry, John, if Eleanor Sturko was leading this party right now, that lead would be multitudes higher than it is right now. And David Eby's got to be scared of that right now, because there's a lot of talk about that. So David Eby has to be scared of that, because there's a weakness right now, and maybe that's the reason they call an election. I mean, I did interview the one candidate that just left Rustad's party, and she said that David Eby should call an election because he could probably win right now. But if they did the old switcheroo, then I'm not so sure. But they did solve.
But look as well at that. Look at where the NDP is most popular. I mean, we already knew this, but Metro Vancouver and Fraser Valley. Where is Eleanor Sturko based? Like, where's her riding? That very same area, ladies and gentlemen, and she can appeal to that set, whereas Rustad is, you know, he's from northern BC. I think he appeals to northern BC and the interior, but it's a different question when it comes to Vancouver, isn't it, really? Although they did do all right in Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley in the election, to be fair to them. But I think long term, you're going to want a different representative, aren't you?
So many egos. It's about time some of these politicians do what's best for Canada, what's best for British Columbia. Do what's best. Just put your ego aside. Canada is not in a place where we can have the luxury of elitism and virtue signaling. We're no longer at that space. Those politics are over. So just do what's right. That's my ask. They did solve the contract, though. The NDP settled the deal. So the historic strike there, involving more than 25,000 public service workers, will now come to an end, as all 34,000 members will vote to ratify that four-year deal. The employees will receive an increase of 3% per year over the 4 years. So there you go, 12% over 4 years. And the agreement was reached on the 8th day of mediation. It includes a faster grievance tribunal process. There you go. So,
but that means, it depends what happens to inflation. Some people are expecting a spike in inflation, aren't they? But as things look now, that means that they'll pretty much beat inflation, which is more than can be said for, again, our beloved private sector, where so many people are still, you know, years behind inflation. They're like in the absolute pits, but obviously not really in a position to go on these mad strikes.
So the famous Ruby Lee, attempted by the Hudson Bay leases there, though sale as one of these has been blocked by court now. So, you know, like she had bought those for about $50 million. And they had, HBC did ink it, but then the malls came back and asked for the courts to decide. And the overall lack of experience and the leadership level represents significant risks to the operational viability of launching and managing 25 large department stores. That was the 48-page decision by the courts. So there you go. And it's kind of sad that Canada's oldest company, and 1625, I believe it is, 16 something. Anyway, 1625, if memory serves me correct, is having its carcass picked over by,
1670.
1670. There you go. Has its carcass picked over by opportunists like this, and why? It's actually sad. So
it's catastrophic, isn't it? And I have to say, of all the places to end up when you go out shopping, that was one of the nicer places. I thought it was like. I mean, I know they had problems. They were living in the past a bit. In many ways, they were living in the past, weren't they? But it's sad for many reasons, I think.
International news. We got some international news for you, though. And Javier Melei.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
Look at me, I just went right over top of the intro there. So Javier Melei storms to a victory in Argentina. You know, like the polls were showing that maybe, perhaps not, but let's play a little clip here. This guy is definitely a boisterous guy. Like, let's play this small clip of him running through the crowd here. That's good. Yeah, so that was midterm elections.
Really, didn't he?
Yeah, the chainsaw guy. The hair. He's also got the hair. And
he's I think he plays guitar as well, doesn't he? He's like he was in a band, I think. And he's an economist. I mean,
big buddy of Trump and Elon Musk. And Trump just gave him, I think it was a $40 billion loan to prop up their currency. Because it, you know, they look pretty bad. So they propped up the Argentina currency, and there you go. They won, and then their government bonds surged Monday after the government midterm elections. So there you go. It's the next one there you can put up from the Wall Street Journal. So yeah, so it looks like there is some faith in that currency right now. So there you go.
Argentina, though, I mean, it is interesting that the Americans are being so nice to the Argentines, because Argentina is a rival to the United States in agricultural produce. Yeah. And just one example of that is the Americans used to sell, God knows, billions of dollars worth of soybeans to China. I think they use that to feed livestock, but I'm not actually sure what they use it for. But that was one of their main sources for soybeans. And they've had a falling out, obviously, over the tariffs and everything. And now Argentina, and I think Brazil to an extent, but Argentina's stepped in as the supplier of soybeans. That's not the only thing that the Argentines can, you know, compete with the Americans on. So that's kind of an interesting one, I think. It's, you know, they could be fostering a real rival here that takes away some of the trade around the world.
Some of the commenters are saying that they can rival Anita Anand's wind for sale. I don't know what Canada has what the world wants, and she said it was wind. Some of our commenters saying it's snow, and it's coming, so maybe we can sell snow. They used to sell ice, so maybe we can sell snow. There's ice caves in Idaho that was sold all around the United States, the ice caves. If you've ever been to those ice caves in Idaho. But this image here represents Europeans' destruction of their own economy right there. Germany blows up its last nuclear plant.
What that represents is usually a much more graphic image, isn't it? Of a man with a shotgun in his mouth. But that's what happens when a country does the equivalent of that. One of the sickest countries on the planet, Germany, in terms of its, you know, the ideology of its leadership. They are just absolutely diseased, poisoned, hopeless people that are in charge of Germany. And it seems like there's nothing they won't do to destroy their own economy and their own country. So this is just yet another episode, isn't it, in that very sick drama that's playing out in Europe.
Well, we have Scott Bessett here again saying that it looks like they have a deal with China. That would be huge. That is the deal that everybody's waiting for. It sounds like Trump and Xi are about to meet, and it sounds like they have a framework for a deal that's ready to be signed. And it sounds like there is a delay as well in those rare earth restrictions. So let's play this small clip here from Scott. Scott getting lots of airtime today.
This was the 5th meeting that I've had with my Chinese counterpart, the Vice Premier, Hu Lifeng, and we covered a wide range of issues, and I think we've reached a substantial framework for the two leaders who will meet in Korea next Thursday. So, on the table, the president had given me maximum leverage when he threatened 100% tariffs if the Chinese imposed their rare earth global export controls. So I think we have averted that, so that the tariffs will be averted. And we have a regular quarterly meeting with the Chinese. It was scheduled for November 10th. Or before November 10th. I don't think we will have to have that. So we have been rolling the tariffs quarterly. So we agreed on that. We also agreed on substantial agriculture purchases for U.S. farmers. We agreed that the Chinese would begin to help us with the precursor chemicals for this terrible fentanyl epidemic that's ravaging our country. So I would say that it was a very good meeting overall.
Stock market responding as well on that. Stock market up, and it'll be interesting to see. So Trump meets with President Xi, and as does Mark Carney, to see who gets what from where, right? What if we get any relief on the canola and pork tariffs, and if Canada relaxes anything on the EV stuff, and then we'll see what happens with these rare earths here. With that's another missed opportunity by Canada. So Australia signs the rare earth deal with the United States. We have tons of rare earth. We're right next door, yet they're going to buy rare earths from Australia. Again, you talked about shipping across the ocean. I think we're right next door. You could actually do it in a pickup truck if you had. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
But this is what the whole Fortress North America thing was about as well. And, you were mentioning earlier, I can't remember who it was, McKay or something, wasn't it? Was talking about how, just pointing out the obvious, that America is way more important for us in terms of trade. And it isn't even just that they're more important, they represent more overall trade. It's also that it's safer, ultimately. Because a lot of what Carney's been talking about is reliability, predictability and trade partners. Geography has something to say about that as well. And if you share the landmass with the country that you trade with, that's a lot more predictable. It's a lot safer. It's a lot more secure than having to go across the world's largest ocean.
So, like, for Canadians that are thinking that we're equals with the Americans when it comes to trade and that, just think of these two things before you open your mouth and virtue signal. Think of these two things. Who has the reserve currency of the world? Of the world. Who has the reserve currency of the world? Whose dollar matters? Who runs fiscal policy of the world? And then who has the military that matters in the world? And you talk about, Ian just said, trade routes are guaranteed. Their safety are guaranteed by the American military. They're sure not guaranteed by the Canadian military. That has been neglected, underfunded, under-equipped, undermanned, and now with housing that's not even fit to live in, unsafe drinking water. Come on. Stop pretending. Like, the virtue signaling will not put food on the table for Canadians.
But you need a navy. It's not just a military, it's a navy, isn't it? And I don't know about you, I haven't seen many capital ships on the way. Where are the aircraft carriers? Like, you need aircraft carriers, you need real, like, battleships and destroyers and things like that. If you want to guarantee a trade route in the 21st century in a world where the US Navy doesn't do it for you, you're going to need a pretty decent fleet. I don't see any evidence of that being on the cards for Canada.
We do not have an aircraft carrier, nor do we have plans to make an aircraft carrier. Because why would we have an aircraft carrier when our jets are 40 years old? We still are hand-wringing over Stephen Harper's decision to buy F-35s. Was it now 11 years ago? Still hand-wringing. We still haven't committed. Still hand-wringing. So what would you put on the aircraft carrier?
Yeah, it's pretty sad, isn't it, really? I mean, I just have to respond here as well. We're talking about Germany, and you-know-who now says, oh, look at the German stock market. It's increased a little bit. I mean, surely I'm not the first person to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Stock market, economy, not the same thing. They're two different things. Sometimes your stock market can be doing quite well while your economy is doomed.
Well, the Canadian stock market is Germany. Well, hey, the Canadian stock market. Go look at the TSX. Looks good.
Yeah. But look at the latest results from Germany's biggest companies. like Porsche. Look, you see the Porsche results. They're like doomed. Porsche, or however you want to pronounce it. Like that's a serious German company, and they've just basically announced defeat. Look at Volkswagen, which I think is their biggest company, their biggest private company. It's not doing particularly well. And then look at all the, what do they call it? I can't even remember the name for it, but they have all of these like middle-sized, Mittelstadt or something like that. These middle-sized companies, medium-sized companies, and they all depended on cheap energy, which came from Russia, or affordable energy. So many of them are screwed, and they've gone to the United States because that's where they can get cheap energy. I mean, chemicals and things like that. They're in trouble, the Germans, in a very, very big way. And just because the DAX has shown a bit of energy, that doesn't mean that Germany's economy is
Let's take
healthy.
a look at the TSX is at all-time highs. The TSX is all-time highs. And we just talked about 60% of Canadians can't pay their bills. They're two different things. They're two different things.
Yep. And we saw that as well, even in America. There have been times where America's been, like, that was a lot of big criticism of the Biden administration. It was like the stock market was doing okay, but the American people were repeatedly expressing their frustrations with the economy. I mean, it's a very old story in economics, this.
The Biden administration told you it was just a feeling. Well, Chrystia Freeland said the same thing. It's just a vibe. It's just a vibe. You can't eat. You can't eat vibes. The elitists will always tell you that. Hey, it's just a vibe. A little more on Trump on the Air Force One again, talking about he's going to Japan. Oh, he actually landed in Japan. He's meeting the new prime minister. I like how some of these put it out there, the right-wing prime minister. He's meeting with her. And let's listen to this clip here.
I hear great things about her. I think she's going to be great. She was a great friend of Mr. Abiy, who was a great man, Prime Minister Abiy, and a great friend of mine, as you know, and he was just a fantastic person, and he liked her a lot, she liked him a lot, so that's a good sign. But I look forward to meeting her.
She's reportedly planning to bring plans to buy Ford F-150 pickup trucks.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. They're great trucks. Are you saying I have that plan, or she has that plan?
She has that plan.
Well, that's great. She has good taste. That's a hot truck.
Hot truck. There you go. Ford stock up. Here's Jim Farley. The next one here says, "Thank you, Ms. Brennan. We agree." So Ford stock up a little bit actually on recent things that they're doing. That they made some plans to shift production to the United States. I mean, they're being reshored back to America. What do you want to call it? Again, Detroit was gutted back in the 80s. Auto manufacturers left Detroit. That was the most important city in the industrialized world. Detroit was Motor City. Remember that? Detroit Motor City, all the songs that came out of Detroit Motor City. Detroit had a population of 1.8 million, down to, like, there's places in Detroit that cops won't even go. 700,000, I think, is what's left in Detroit. And General Motors used to be the #1 corporation in the world. I remember reading that book in 1980. On a clear day, you can see GM, the most powerful corporation in the world. I don't think you can find GM on the top list of anything. You're going to find like stocks, and then you're going to find the crud, and then below the crud will be below the crud, and right under there you'll probably find General Motors. But
and it's quite important context here as well. We're talking about Japan. The big problem for the American car manufacturers back then in the 80s was that they couldn't compete with the Japanese. And somebody earlier on was going on about Ronald Reagan saying like, "Oh no, actually you've misunderstood that speech that he made, because he was talking about Japan and how he had to put some tariffs on Japan." Yeah, have you ever heard of the phrase "the exception proves the rule"? He was very against tariffs, but Japan, through various nefarious means, quite cheeky means, was flooding the US market with cheap cars that were good on gas. That was one of the main things that they beat out the old American companies on. And that came about because of the 1973 war between Israel and various Arab countries. And that brought on the oil shock. I mean, it's quite complicated. when you're talking about Ronald Reagan's ideas or Ronald Reagan's positions on economics. But broadly speaking, he was very much in favor of free trade.
Our friend Lightning Rod just likes to have fun. But anyway, he said that we just said the stock market is meaningless. I don't remember saying the stock market is meaningless. I'm just saying the two are disconnected. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. Like, and they are connected in some ways, but they don't mean everything, right? Like, come on. Anyway.
Well, we said the economy and the stock market are two different things. I mean, it's a non sequitur once again from our close, dear, cherished friend, Mr. Rod.
Look at this, the Prime Minister of Japan lighting it up for Trump, just like they did in Qatar and all those kind of things. We'll see what kind of welcome our Prime Minister gets. There you go, lighting it up for Trump. And then Dow up was up about 200 points there this morning. Right now, the Dow up. What's the Dow up right now? Let's take a look. Take a quick look. The Dow is up about 240 points right now. And Lightning Rod, the TSX is down about 117 points right now. If you want to, NASDAQ on a rip, NASDAQ on a tear, absolute tear. And for all of you people that love to hate, love to hate Elon Musk. Like, remember Tim Walz was putting up that thing and showing you like how he was trying to drive Tesla stock into the ground. He had a little app that when he felt bad when Tesla was going down. Well, Tim, don't look today. Tesla up $25. Nearing record territory. Don't look today, Tim. We were going to do this Hakeem thing, but it's just a waste. There's some gerrymandering going on, and of course the Democrats are pretending it doesn't even make sense. So, but let's get to the one that will end with this. Back in the news. Justin Trudeau and Katy Perry, the two most beloved people somewhere. There must be some place they'd be the most beloved people, wouldn't it be? Don't you think? Somewhere they were out at a nightclub.
Some suburbs of Los Angeles, perhaps.
They were celebrating her 45th birthday. And then here's a clip of Katy Perry. Like, I mean, Justin Trudeau, famous for virtue signaling, right? Even Chrystia Freeland said he wasted a decade of Canada's economy on virtue signaling and identity politics. But Katy Perry says, hold my beer. Look what she can do. Check this out. Literally, hold my beer, eh? Hey?
She's a bit gross, isn't she?
Oh, my. They deserve each other.
Giving some people delight there, wasn't she? There were some whoops there from the audience.
They deserve each other, 100%. They absolutely deserve each other.
They're both quite strange, aren't they? So I guess in that sense. Yeah. I'm sad that we didn't do Arnie, by the way, but I guess we haven't got time.
You want to go back to Arnie? We can go play Arnie. Let's go play Arnie.
Because it's rare. Because Arnie in the last few years has been considered almost like a Democrat. So it's quite rare for him to actually go back to his Republican roots.
Well, if we're going to play Arnie, we got to play the guy. We got to play Hakeem first then, because they go together. Because we got some time. We'll play Hakeem here, talking about gerrymandering and actually getting called out on Face the Nation.
You said Democrats, there are no election deniers on our side of the aisle. You said that back in January. But recently, you've been using the term rigged elections in reference to the upcoming midterms. Democrats were appalled when President Trump used language like that. How do you justify using that now? Doesn't that undermine faith for voters? You need to show up.
No, I've been using that term in the context of Donald Trump's unprecedented effort to gerrymander congressional maps in a partisan fashion all across the country in order to rig the midterm elections and deny the ability of the American people to actually decide who should be in the majority as it relates to the House of Representatives.
You know, Democrats are also going through gerrymandering.
That's good. From Hakeem there, because he's just a nonsensical guy. But let's listen to Jake. let's listen to Jake Tapper try to catch my good friend here, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Arnold Schwarzenegger says, like, if you don't have enough time in the day, sleep faster. I sleep about 5 hours a day. Arnie says about 5 hours a day too. He just says if you need 8 hours, you need to sleep faster. But anyway, let's listen to what. Like you said, he was a Republican governor, but he definitely has a lot of Democratic leanings for sure. But listen into what he has to say.
As you acknowledged, this all started because of redistricting in Texas, and this was Trump pushing Republican-controlled states to throw out their current congressional maps so as to cook the books, so that it is less likely for Democrats to retake control of the House during the next year midterms. I mean, is it fair to argue do you believe that the Republican Party is starting this?
No, Jake. There has been gerrymandering going on for 200 years. There is such extreme gerrymandering going on that in a state like Massachusetts, that has like 40% of the people voting for Trump, they have 0 representatives. The Republican Party has 0 representatives sent to the House. Think about that. In New Mexico, if 45% of the people voted for Trump and voted Republican, and 0 is sent to the House, 0 representative from the Republican Party. So there's gerrymandering, crazy gerrymandering going on all.
You know, if Arnie could run for president, he might make a shot at it, right? I'll be back.
He's just the voice. It's just, it's remarkable, isn't it?
He's a good, sane voice. I like when he says, "No, Jake, no." Like it's not an emotional thing. No, Jake, don't make me come over there, Jake.
But it's true. I mean, this thing about gerrymandering, the idea that one side can look down on the other is absurd. They do this stuff all the time, and they won't even agree. In the past, there've been these efforts to kind of like take it away from the control of the representatives, and it just doesn't succeed. And it's kind of, they've dug their own grave here, and they just continue to play it like this.
Somebody did put out a point here, and it's kind of like, what would, and hopefully he doesn't do it. Hopefully nobody gives him an idea to do it. What would Canada say if all of a sudden the Trump administration started running ads in Canada for Alberta to separate? That would probably cause some grief, right? But
I don't think you could compare Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs but
anyway, I think this is Doug Ford needs to sit down. Maybe instead of pouring that Crown Royal on the ground, maybe pour himself a couple of stiff shots and make this phone call.
But he's addicted to the popularity that it gives him, isn't he? The anti-Americanism. Not only does it make him popular, but it's also this glorious excuse. We've seen David Eby do that. Anything goes wrong. Oh, Donald Trump, you bugger. You bloody orange fella.
Here you go, Doug. You're going to make this call. Well, are we going to make this call?
Yeah, listen. We fucked up. Yeah, listen.
That's good.
We fucked up.
There you go. Okay, Doug, make the call. Take the heat. Be the fall guy. You are the fall guy. Apologize.
Well, he's got no shame, has he? So he could easily do it. It would be water off a duck's back with Dougie.
Yeah. Just enough, right? Like Canadians need jobs. Canadians need not to live off their credit cards. Look what's beneath your feet. Mark Carney, say the words. Is Canada a nation? We've asked this question 100 times. Is Canada a nation, or does the British Columbia own that coastline? Make the decision for Canada. Make the decision for Canada. Show that you're the PM and say you're putting a pipeline. That will bring the nation together like none before. Say you're going to build Danielle Smith's pipeline to the Pacific coast.
Put country above party. That would be my advice. Just for once in your career as Liberal leader, Mr. Carney, risk alienating some people within the Liberal Party. Just do it, because there are more important things in this world and in this country than the Liberal Party. Park this carbon climate grift, carbon capture into the drawer for 50 years and maybe drag it out then, but put it away. Nobody's going to buy it. Nobody's going to buy into it. Just give it to Melanie Jolie, and she'll spend the next 5 years in working groups wasting time, and just like, it'll be perfect. She'll give a lot of speeches about carbon capture and all this, and nothing will happen. It'll be great.
Anyway, that's our show for today. Thank you for watching. If you could like and subscribe, share as much as you can. This is a lot different than what you get from CBC. We try to give you a broad range of topics and stuff like that. And we do lots of interviews as well. We have a lot of exclusive stuff that we do, and we appreciate you. And we fight for freedom of the press every day. We fight for repealing Bill C-18, another thing that holds back freedom of the press and independent media in Canada. If only we could get access to the MPs. They restrict access to the parliamentary gallery. They restrict access everywhere. And we need to be able to hold them accountable. Anyway, that's our show. We'll see you tomorrow morning. We're on every morning at 9 a.m. But of course, you can watch it after the fact as well, because it's all on our Now Media Group channel. And again, we appreciate you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.